The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi there, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us today. We have the final day of WBEX 2013. How exciting! We have three exceptional sessions today, starting with Ago. Next, we have Francis Hasselbein, and Francis was who Peter Drucker said was the world's #1 leadership expert, which is pretty special. And then finally, we have Howard Morgan, who is a business partner of Marshall Goldsmith and has wrote a bunch of books with him, and he is an absolute rock star too. So we have three rock stars for you back to back. Before anything, as always, can I ask that you please let me know that you can hear me loud and clear by raising your hand in the air and saying, Ben, I can hear you loud and clear. Thank you very much for that. Okay, cool. You can put your hands down now. I'll put them down for you. So, yes, we have some absolutely incredible sessions planned for you today. What we always encourage is for you to jump onto the Facebook wall, facebook.com/WBECS at the end, and post your comments, feedback, and words of love on there. All of our presenters jump on there, and they very much appreciate it. So please do that. Also, if you're on Twitter, please tweet with the hashtag WBECS 2013. My mum actually uses Twitter more than I do at the moment. She's actually a massively avid Twitter follower. She's actually just asked if I can set up a blog for her, which would be quite interesting. Anyway, so today we have Ago Clutens for you. Now, Ago is an experienced management consultant, coach, and trainer, and practice director EMEA at Rain Group. He specializes in helping organizations and individuals succeed in making complex, high-end sales to senior decision makers and CXOs in the Fortune 500. As a former management consultant with Big Four professional services firm Ernst & Young, as well as Arthur Andersen, Ago has years of first-hand experience selling to the C-suite. He has worked with dozens of C-level executives as a management consultant and also advisor. So expect a fantastic session today. Ago is going to be stopping throughout to answer questions. So please ask questions. You have the opportunity to ask one of the world's leading experts in this area. So please take the time to ask the questions and make use of this fantastic resource. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to my good friend, Ago. Over to you, Ago.
All right. Hey, thank you, Ben. Thanks for that introduction. And just really appreciate being here. I really appreciate being part of the final day of WBEX 2013. I've got something very, very, very special in store for this session. I'm actually going to unveil a methodology which so far I've only used with my clients behind closed doors, if you will. And for the very, very first time, I'm going to open this up to the WBEX audience. And so today we're going to be talking about business development, business generation, sales, whatever you want to call it. And here's where I stand on that. I mean, like everybody on this call, I love doing the work that I do. I love coaching. I love consulting. I love being a high-end advisor to my clients. But a couple of years ago, so well over a decade, I guess, I started realizing that I could only do that if I took one step before that, which is obviously in order to do the work that we do, we need to be able to sell ourselves. We need to be able to build relationships of trust, and there's a lot that goes into that. The practice, the art of selling, of generating and developing business has evolved tremendously in recent years. What I want to do in this session is I want to walk you through a structured approach that is going to help you, that is designed to get the attention of senior executives, of CXOs and mid-sized and large corporations, to get you in the door and to get you to stay there, to be able to start building that relationship as a trusted advisor to senior management and to do the great work that you do. And for me, it's especially exciting to be here because I've benefited tremendously from coaching and executive coaching in my own career. I've had the good fortune of working with a couple of great executive coaches while I was an executive in industry. Some great coaches that helped me build my own business as an entrepreneur. And it's just so great to be able to give back. So I want to start off the session by sort of broadening our minds a little bit and really thinking about potential and opportunity. Now, I'm going to ask you 3 questions. And I realize that in the beginning, when you first see these questions, your initial response may be, you know, that's over the top, or that's not possible, or I just can't see how that would happen yet. What I would encourage you to do is just push through that initial reaction. Just you know, push through it, set it aside, you know, quiet the inner critic, if you will, and think about really what the impact and the potential could be if you were able to make something like that happen. So here's the first question. What if you could double the size of your average sale? So if you're selling coaching engagements worth, you know, maybe $10,000 right now, what if you could bring that up to 20? What if you're selling 20,000, you could bring that up to maybe 50? What if you're already doing 50,000 and you could bring that up to 100? What if you're at the 6-figure level and you could do engagements, perhaps including coaching and other things, that run from 300 to 400,000 to maybe $500,000 and over? What if you could do that? Now the second question is this: what if you could cut the length of your sales cycle in half? I don't know about you, but many of my clients report that they've certainly seen sales cycles go up. It used to be maybe 3 months, and now it's 6. It used to be 6 months, now it's a year. I've had an extreme case recently where one of my clients made a deal with an opportunity they were pursuing for 4 years. 4 years. I mean, that's extreme, of course. But what if you could lengthen or shorten your sales cycle so you could do more of them in a single year, in a single quarter, in a single period? And the final and third question, which is my favorite question, is what if you could do both? What if you could at the same time increase the average size of your deal by a multiple, 2, 3, 4 times, maybe more, and reduce the length of your sales cycle? What would the impact on your business be? That's what can happen once you start connecting, being a trusted advisor to the highest levels within your clients, within your organizations. Now, is that going to mean that's going to happen overnight? No. As with anything in life that's worth you know, a great deal, this is sometimes a difficult process. It is a lengthy process, but it is a very, very doable process. What I want to give you today is give you the highlights, the 30,000-foot view, including the tactics and some of the tools that I'm using and that I recommend that my clients use in order to make this happen. So I realize a lot of you may or may not know me and may or may not have read some of my things. So I am practice director, EMEA at Ring Group. My name is Ago. And my career has really sort of been split 3 ways. In the first part of my career, I spent selling and delivering high-end management consulting services, strategy consulting, business strategy, management consulting to large corporations, typically in the Fortune 50 and Fortune 100. I did that for several years, worked for 2 out of the big 4 consulting firms. And then I went into industry, and I joined a top 10 financial institution, financial services firm called ING, and I spent a little over a decade there. And throughout that decade, I did no selling whatsoever. I literally didn't sell anything. The only thing I did, and I did a lot of, was buying. I bought executive search, executive coaching, management consulting, systems integration, professional services, business consulting, all sorts of professional services. And I sat in, you know, the other day I made a calculation. I must have sat into, you know, well over 1,000 meetings where people came in and pitched something to me or to other managers and executives within the firm. And so that's where you really start seeing patterns. That's where you start seeing what works, what doesn't work. And so today, a lot of the work that I do benefits from that experience of having been, quote unquote, on both sides of the table and on the receiving end. And then for the last 5 years, I've ran my own firm, and now I'm practice director at Ring Group. And basically what I do is I help people like yourselves, people who sell high-end advisory services, consulting, coaching, training, systems integration, sell to senior decision makers in large corporations and the Fortune 500. So 3 quick fun facts about myself. The first one is I love to sell, but I'm not a salesperson. I've never held a full-time sales role in my life. I don't think I would particularly enjoy it. I love the combination of, on the one hand, delivering and seeing the impact that we can make as professionals and as advisors with our clients, and on the other hand, also generating and developing the business and going out and seeking new opportunities and growing the firm, growing the practice. I love that combination, and I'm sure a lot of you on the call do as well. I've still bought more than I sold in absolute numbers. And the third thing is really, the third fact is, between selling and me, it really wasn't love at first sight. In fact, let me tell you a brief story about my first ever sales meeting. And I'll say it up front, it was an absolute disaster. It was quite an embarrassing story, but I really, really learned something that to this day continues to influence how I think about selling, generating, and developing business. So this was about, I guess, close to 20 years ago, and I was a fresh consultant, fresh out of college, about 3 weeks, I think, into my first role as a junior management consultant. And I've been doing a bit of work with a partner at the firm where I was, and we were scheduled to go see a major prospect that afternoon. So in the morning, I get a call about 8:15 or so, and he calls me up and he says, "Ago, we have a problem. I'm not going to be able to make that meeting." And I said, "Well, what's going on?" He said, I don't know, my head feels like it's about to explode, and I've got a fever, and I'm not feeling very well at all. I'm not going to be able to make that meeting. I think we should cancel. And I said, "Well, okay, but you know, we've been preparing for this for several months. We've been trying to get in the door. You know, we finally have this opportunity, so you know, why cancel? Why not just let me go? I know the issues. I've done the research. Agreed. I've only been here for about a month or so, but still, I can do this." And there was this very quiet silence and pause on the other end of the phone. And I remember thinking, well, this should be a no-brainer, right? And so after about 5 seconds, he comes back and he says, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm sure." He said, "Okay, well, go ahead and, you know, let's hope it goes well." And I remember saying something along the lines of, "Don't worry, it will go well." Famous last words. So I get off the phone, I open my computer, I start pulling together a slide deck. As a good management consultant, I put in everything I could find, you know, 4-box models, our credentials, our history as a firm, our client list, our models, our methodology, our processes, the kind of engagements that we do, our people, our team, you know. And after about 2 hours or so, I end up with something like 132 slides. And I close my computer, I get in the car, I rush out to the client, go to the lobby, go up to his office, I'm introduced, and I say 3 things. I say, "Hello, sir, my name is Aga." I say, "Nice to meet you." And I say, "Do you have a power plug?" This really happened. And he looks at me and he says, "Sure, there's one in the corner." So I go to the corner, I set up my computer, I brought a portable projector for good measure, just to make sure that my slides would look absolutely right. And I start going through my slides. An hour later, 55 minutes later, I'm at slide 20-something, maybe 32 or something like that. And, you know, my prospect just looks at me, he looks at his watch and he goes, "I'm sorry, I think my next appointment's just arrived, I need to get going. But thank you for your time, it was very educational." And I remember thinking, that's an odd word to use, educational. It must have been interesting, right? So I walk out the door, and as I'm sort of gently escorted out, I remember saying something like, so what's going to happen next? And he says, "We'll let you know." And that's when, in my naivete, I really thought he would. I really thought he'd get back to us and there'd be a follow-up conversation. Never happened. Never heard from that prospect again. We actually did, but it took us 18 months to get back in the door. And so fast forward a couple of months, and I'm sitting down with the same partner who fortunately hadn't, you know, gotten rid of me yet. And we're having lunch in a nice restaurant in Brussels. And as we're having lunch, he leans over the table and looks at me and he goes, "Ago, you know, We just sold a major deal worth, somewhere south of 6 figures. You were a big part of that. You helped us bring that in, very successful. It was a service that we tried to launch for 2 years in Europe, which we successfully launched in the US before and hadn't caught on, and we were the first ones across Europe entirely to sell our first project. And he looked across the table and he said, "What did you learn?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." And he said, "Well, how did the first meeting go?" And I said, "It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. I did nothing but talk. The prospect wasn't interested. He wasn't engaged. He didn't ask a single question. And it was a train wreck happening, and I could see it happening right in front of my eyes, but I didn't know what to do." And then he said, "And how did the second meeting feel?" I said, "The second meeting felt awesome. I mean, I was asking questions, and they were asking me questions, and it was a dialogue, and we were, sort of building on each other's conclusions. And by the end of the meeting, it just would have felt like it was already decided we were going to work together. The only thing we needed to do was figure out the money side, and that's it." And then he leaned across the table, and he looked at me, and he said, and he literally said this. He said, "I'm going to tell you something, that as long as you do this line of work, as long as you're in this business, you're going to remember." And I said, "Well, what is it?" And this is what he said. He said, "Your ability to generate business, to generate new business, more business, is directly correlated or related to your ability to have better conversations." Your ability to generate more business is directly related to your ability to have better conversations. In today's world, selling to highly senior, highly educated, highly driven, highly motivated, highly intelligent people, like the people that you and I and everybody on this call sells to every single day, selling equals having great conversations. Now, there's a method to it, which I'll show you in this talk, but the first point I want to make is selling is not about pushing. It's not about overcoming objections. It's not about pitching your product or your service. Maybe it used to be in the 60s or the 70s or even back in the 1980s, and maybe in some form of selling where maybe you're selling commodity products or low-end gear or something like that. Maybe that's still the case. But for what we do, high-end advisory services like coaching, selling is about having great conversations. So here's what we'll cover today. First, very briefly, I'm sure everybody on this call is convinced that selling to the C-suite is where you want to be. Now, when I ask my clients why, they're often at a loss for an answer. They'll say something like, "Well, that's where the decisions are made," or "That's where you can really make an impact." But there's a couple of factors that really make selling to the C-suite extremely attractive, and I want to share those with you. Then I want to walk you through the 5-step IRIS process. This is the exact process that I use to get meetings, to start building relationships with clients successfully, and the exact method that I teach my clients. And then finally, we're going to hold an open forum Q&A. There are no taboos. There are no questions that can be asked. I will do my best to answer honestly, speak from my perspective as both someone who sells every single day, someone who is a high-end advisor and a trusted advisor to some of my clients, and someone who's been on the buying side of the table. So I want to reserve a good chunk of that, not only on the back end, but I'll take 2 pauses during the presentation just to keep it interactive and to make sure that we mix things up a little bit and give you all the opportunity to ask literally any question that comes to mind. So that's what we're going to cover. So let's start by talking a little bit about why would you want to sell to the C-suite in the first place? And interestingly, there's an acronym in the sales world, if you will, that's been around forever, and it's called BANT. Now, some of you probably heard about it. It's a method of qualification. It's a way of determining whether or not the person that you're talking to is worth your time, is worth your effort. And BANT stands for 4 things. It's for budget, authority, need, and time. Now, the problem with BANT is this. In today's world of shrinking budgets, high-paced business, internal competition for resources, people don't start out the fiscal year say, well, this year we're going to budget $2 million for executive coaching. They'll have a pocket of money somewhere, and that pocket of money will be allocated as and when needed, and as and when they make decisions around where to allocate that. And especially when you're talking about senior executives, this is crucial, because senior executives invariably have the ability to find the money when it's needed, but they need to make the decision on where to allocate it. And so rather than talk about BANT, we at Rain Group talk about FAINT. Now, FAINT is, FA stands for Financial Authority. So senior executives can either have a budget, and they often will, or they can find one when they need it. And that's one reason to sell to the higher levels of the organization. The I stands for the interest, the personal interest, and we'll go into that much more throughout the talk, but the personal interest of the executive is a key driver for how they allocate resources, how they make decisions, how they invest their time, how they invest money, how they invest other organizational resources, how they influence throughout the organization. And so another great reason to sell at that level is because there's a vested interest, and they want to move forward, and they want to, quote unquote, make a dent in the universe, make things happen, move the needle much more than you'll find people at mid-level management do. We'll talk a little bit about the differences between senior executives or senior management and middle management later. CXOs rely heavily on a network of internal and external trusted advisors that they look to for guidance, for decisions, for input, and your ability to not only generate business, but have a rewarding professional life is often comes from being part of that circle of trusted advisors. And if you are, they have a strong need for your services. And you'll find, and you probably already have, that there are certain clients that you're talking to, that you're working with at this point in time, who call you for services which are completely unrelated to what you do, where they think, you know, maybe you can help me, maybe you can't, but I'd like to talk. In fact, I remember a couple of years ago, I got a call from a client I'd done some work with him a couple of months before, and he called me up out of the blue, and he asked me to help him out with a compensation and benefits project. Now, I was doing marketing and brand strategy work at the time, and I asked him, I said, why do you call me for a compensation and benefits project? And he said, listen, it's really not about the technical expertise, because I have that internally. What I need is someone that can come in and that can use a process that they've used before in order to figure out what needs to be done, in what order it needs to be done, and what we're looking for in terms of end result. Now, I know you can do that, and I know it's not your area of expertise, but let's talk anyway. That's when you know you become a trusted advisor. And then finally, the T stands for senior executives. Once they're convinced they need to move, they move. And they move now. It's not about, you know, I need to get a budget or I need to pass this in front of a committee. Those things might happen, but if they happen, they often happen very quickly, and they often happen with minimal pushback, because the senior executives have made it clear that they're behind the decision and they want to move forward. But this is the most important key reason. The C-suite is often the place where, as a business or executive coach, we can make the largest impact. Now, I don't know about you, but this is why I do what I do. It's not about you know, making money, or it's not about certainly isn't about prestige, or it's not about you know, the extensive travel. I'm sure the same applies for you. I'm sure it does. It is about seeing the impact that we can make with people, with individuals, with teams, and ultimately with an entire organization. So that's why I personally love selling to the C-suite. That's why a lot of people who are interested in selling to the C-suite come to me and seek my services, if you will. Now, here's the, I wouldn't even say the million-dollar question. For the last 3 years, I've been asking my network, people I meet, prospects, clients, other, you know, colleagues, and I'll ask them a simple question. And the answer is, well, the question is, so what is the biggest issue or challenge or hurdle that you have when it comes to growing your business? And invariably, the answer that comes back is a variation on this. If I can only get into the room, I'm good. If I can only generate more leads, I'm good. If I can only get more meetings, I'm good. If I can only get in front of more people and really sit down and have a conversation and speak with them, understand their issues, then usually, more often than not, we'll find that there's a need that I can solve, and we'll advance on that path toward making a potential sale, towards working together, toward expanding the relationship, whatever it is that you're looking for. But here's the problem. Most people don't know how to get there. Most people try different things. They'll try one thing and then it doesn't work, and then they'll try something else, but there is no coherent effort behind it. So what I want to do is on this call, on this talk, on this presentation, I want to give you that effort. I want to give you that process. I want to give you the 5 steps to the corner office. Now, this is something that I developed and that I've been using for many, many years now. I started using it for myself, and gradually I started using it in my client work. And if you look at it, there really are 2 components in order to make this work. And the first component is you need to have a clear strategy. You need to have an overarching strategy, a process, a structured method in which to approach this. And when I look out in the marketplace, I see a lot of people that offer strategies. You know, this model or that model, or the 7 steps to growing your business. And those are great. Those are absolutely needed. You need a strategy. You need a process. You need a framework in order to advance and move forward, to understand where you're going, where you are, and how to get from where you are now to where you want to be. As Marshall Goldsmith would say, what got you here won't get you there, right? So you need to understand what will get you there. And that's the strategy part. Now then there's another type of provider, and they provide tactics, tools, tips, how to get noticed on LinkedIn, how to improve your social media presence, how to have great qualification calls, how to have a great first meeting. You also need those, but it's really where the 2 come together that magic starts to happen, because one can't live without the other. They're like, you know, two sides of the same coin. You really need both. So my objective in this session is to give you both. I'm going to talk about strategy. I'm going to talk about a high-level process that you can use. But I'm also going to talk about tactics and tools. So let me start by giving you the broad 30,000-foot view of the IRIS process. Now, IRIS consists of 5 steps, which gradually build on each other. And the whole idea is to go from where you have no previous relationships, you have perhaps not even an idea of who your ideal client is, of who you want to target, to go to where you've had successful first meetings and you can really start the sales process. You can really start deepening and building the relationship. So it's from going, in a sense, to having a lot of doors in front of you and not knowing which one is the right one, to being in the door, in the room, and starting to do the great work that you do. And the first step on that journey is to identify what your ideal client looks like. And there's a myriad of ways to do this. And I'm going to talk about a couple, particularly that work really, really well as they're selling to senior decision makers in large organizations. So the first step is to identify who you want to talk to, in a sense, or who you want to target. And the second step is to research. Research is to develop a deep understanding of their needs, their desires, but also of the broader context and the framework in which they operate. The third step, once you know who to talk to and you understand the issues, is to initiate the conversation, to establish contact, to start seeding the relationship. And I'll give you some very practical and tangible strategies for how to do that. The fourth step is something that many of my clients struggle with. It is to select and to self-select, and I'll explain what I mean by that. So you can target those opportunities that are worth your time, worth your effort moving forward. A lot of the advisors, consultants, coaches that I work with, that I speak with, have an issue in the sense that they're not selective enough. A lot of business development is not only about identifying who to target, who to work with, who to build a relationship with. It is also sometimes and often about who not to approach, who not to continue talking with, who not to continue building a relationship with. And the fifth step is to seduce. Now, I use that word very, very, very specifically, because business development and the philosophy that I have and that I share, if you will, is about seduction. The time where we could cajole a client into buying from us, where we could use, clauses or, or statements or specific techniques that are designed to get a deal to close, that time is over. And if it's not over, it certainly won't last for very much longer. And I'm sure from what I know, everything that I know from speaking with thousands of high-end advisors, there's one thing, which is that universally, they feel uncomfortable about pushing their services. And in today's world, that's great, because buyers don't want to be sold to. Buyers want to be seduced. Buyers don't want to be sold to, they want to be seduced. And so the fifth step, which brings everything full circle, is to seduce your buyer. So let's walk through the 5 steps in sequence. And what I'm going to do is, at the end of the first 2, I'll take a little break and we'll take some questions. So I want to encourage you to start thinking about those questions and just type those in the question box so we can get those up there. And we can have a good conversation here and good interaction going. So the first step is to identify. It all begins with answering the question, who? Now, when I say that, a lot of people, they have a more or less defined idea of who they want to work with. So clients may come and see me and they'll say, so I work with senior executives. Let me take a coaching example. I'm an executive coach and I work with senior executives who want to improve their personal performance and that of their team. And that's what they'll say in answer to the question, who do you work with? And I say, well, that's great, but what does that mean? And so what I encourage them to do is really think about a couple of key questions. And the key questions are really, what industries do your clients tend to come from? And if you don't already have clients, what industries do your ideal clients, will they come from? What industries do you have experience in, expertise in? Industry experience and expertise is one of the biggest factors why clients choose to hire one provider over another. Because they feel that if you understand their industry and if you understand their issues, then you'll understand them and you'll be better able to help them. So think about that. Which industry do your clients tend to come from? I'll give you an example in a minute. What size of companies do you work with? I have a lot of coaches come to me or consultants saying, I typically work with small and medium-sized enterprise, but I'd like to start targeting the Fortune 100. And where that certainly isn't impossible, that is not self-evident. Because you have experience in a certain type of company with a certain type of profile, with a certain type of problematic and challenges, and it's hard to go from there to an entirely different set. The reason why I specialize in selling to the C-suite, to mid-corps and large corporations, is because that's all I've ever done. I've sold to, and I've been a buyer in three large Fortune 100 corporations. And so that's why I understand that world. I understand how they think. I understand how they behave. I understand how they act. And that's an asset. I would have a hard time, working in strategy consulting for small and medium-sized enterprise. I can do it for what I do because it's very specific, but for strategy consulting, it would be more complex. So what size of company do you work with? Really think about that. Then, rather than just think about, I work with senior executives, think about what kind of senior executive. Do you specialize in coaching CEOs, or do you specialize in working more with CIOs or CTOs perhaps, or VPs of HR? So what functions and titles do they hold? Which companies have you worked with? This is huge when it comes to understanding and accessing and tapping into a specific target market. Which companies have you worked with? Because that gives you credibility. I asked a friend of mine who's global head of learning and development for a top 3 pharmaceutical firm. And I called her up a few months ago and I asked her, I said, listen, here's a question. When you decide who to meet with, I mean, she gets solicited by dozens of potential providers a week. And I say, when you decide who to meet with, what is the one thing that they do or have that gets you to open your door for them? What is it? And she didn't even blink. Within a split second, she told me, she said, I need to know 3 things. I need to know that the problem I have, that they have solved it successfully before. I need to know that they can do it again. And I need to know that they can do it repeatedly, reliably, and with the same result. That's it. They've solved my problem before. They can do it again, and they can do it repeatedly, reliably, and again and again and again. So which companies you worked for and which kind of issues that you've solved is crucial in order to develop that kind of credibility when you're talking to senior decision makers. And then finally, which geographic area do you cover? So let me give you an example. Let me give you my own. I work with, and it's one of my segments, there's multiple, but one of them is principals, partners, senior partners, and managing partners in management consulting and executive search. Size of company is typically, and I put this in revenue numbers, but let's say it's mid-corp to large corporation. And they are located across major metropolitan areas in Europe within a 50-mile radius around Paris, London, Brussels, Amsterdam, Geneva, Zurich, Frankfurt, Munich. And then there's the Middle East, which is primarily Qatar, the Emirates, and Dubai. And then there is, in Africa, it's South Africa. So my region, if you will, is EMEA. And that's the kind of understanding that you need to develop about your prospect. Now, does that mean that you can't go after anyone else? No. But that means that if you're going to do a proactive, concerted effort in order to go into a particular segment, that is the level of granularity and knowledge that you need in order to understand who you're going to target. What I'm giving you here is a process, a practical process that you can follow, almost like a checklist, where once you tick one off, you go to the next one. And at the end, what you end up with is the basis for approaching and accessing an entirely new market, an entirely new segment. But this is only the first step. The second step is to turn that understanding of who you're targeting into a list of named individuals, because you can't sell to functions. You can't sell to senior executives in large corporations. That gets you nowhere. What you need is you need a list of names. Now, when I say that, a lot of people, they'll just kind of throw up their hands in the air and go, where am I going to get a list? I don't want to buy a list. I agree. You don't want to buy a list. When you buy a list, typically the list quality is low. They're not going to be engaged. You're going to run into all sorts of issues down the road. Instead, what I would recommend is there are 3 methods that I've used personally which work really, really well. Now, the first method is obviously LinkedIn. I mean, I'm sure, I wouldn't even say if you're not on LinkedIn, I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, are already on LinkedIn. For what I see, executive coaches and business coaches especially are very, very good at using and leveraging LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is a great tool to use. I can't go into a lot of detail here, but there's a ton of information out there about how to use LinkedIn to build lists and to build prospect lists. And if you have what I just described, you can literally go into LinkedIn, plug it in, and you'll get a list of results. Another great tool that I've used is ZoomInfo. ZoomInfo is great. It's not so great for Europe, unfortunately, but it's a tool that you can use in order to plug in what I just mentioned, a combination of function, industry, size of company, titles, and geographic areas, and then you'll get a list back. That's your starter list. Now there's one which is, it's like, it's not my best or sort of my most hidden secret, but it's a tool called SalesLoft. And what it is SalesLoft specializes in Salesforce automation support technology. Now, one thing they do is they have a free plugin for Chrome. So it's a Chrome browser, and it's a plugin for that. And what it does is it lives in your Chrome browser, and you can literally type in any combination of the factors I mentioned, the criteria that I mentioned, function, geographic area, title, type of company, even size of company. And you click the button, and in your Google search, you get a list of the people that respond to that criteria. Then you can click a link in the bottom right, and I'd encourage you to just go download it. I can't do a demo here. But you click a link, and then the list starts compiling. So you can add 10 at a time. So before you know it, it's very easy to get to 200, 300, 400, perhaps even 500 people, depending on how you search and how expansive your search is. Now, at this point, what you have is you've got your starter list. You have a list of names, functions, and other demographic information that you can use in order to really hone down, zoom in on your target market. What you don't have is contact details, unless you're using ZoomInfo. Now, at this point, what a lot of people do is they'll go on LinkedIn, and then they'll send in-mails, and they'll send introductions, and they'll ask for referrals, and that works, but it is time-consuming, and it is relatively slow. So instead, if you're using ZoomInfo, you don't have this problem, because you can just download and you've got the email addresses. It's relatively up-to-date. You're going to get a couple of bounces, a couple of errors, a couple of things that don't work, but it's relatively up-to-date. What I did is, and you really have a choice. You buy a service or you buy someone's time. So what I do is I buy someone's time. I have a virtual assistant who helps me generally in my business. So what I'll do is I'll give the list over to her, and I'll ask her to make some initial research and information calls. What that is very simply, she'll call the organization that person works for. She'll ask for, and you know, you want to be genuine in this. I want to provide value. That's the foundation for everything. So I'm not going to reach out to them and say, can we set up a meeting, or can we have coffee? No, there's a process to it. I'll provide value. And so what she'll say, she'll call them up, and she'll say, you know, we just came out with this new research. It has to be true, of course. We'd like to share that with you know, Mr. X within your organization. Could I have his email address? Works 80, 90% of the time. If it doesn't work, what they'll offer typically is they'll give you a generic email address, and then you can send that to the email, and then they'll forward that to the executive. So that's a way of building a list, an initial starter list when you want to move into a new segment. Now, can you use this when you're already in a particular market? Of course. So there are a couple of things to consider. When I ask my clients to do this, to think about, you know, who is it that you really sell to? Who is it that you really want to sell to? It's often difficult because they have trouble sort of getting out of the, you know, these are my current clients and this is what I do mindset. And often they'll find that there's a much broader and, in fact, most likely a much more attractive market out there than they ever thought. So a couple of dimensions to consider. Think about your current clients. I mean, your current clients are great. LinkedIn has a great feature, again, where you go and you click on a company. Then you get, in the bottom right, I believe, you get a list of related companies. Hey, these are companies that look similar. Let me tell you, I use this. It works like a charm. When we've done some work with a client who's very satisfied with the kind of service that we offered, who's very satisfied with the kind of results that we've been getting for them, I use this, and I reach out to the other companies. And I'll tell them, hey, we've recently done some work with a company in your industry. If you're interested, I could walk you through confidentially and respecting the client's anonymity and to talk about what we did with them, what the results were, et cetera, et cetera. Works really well. Second thing is, think about your track record. Which industries and companies have you worked with that went really, really well? What are the 3, 4, 5 biggest deals that you've had where you've made the most impact and the clients are literally, standing on the sidelines cheering about how great you are? Leverage that. Also think about who you will no longer work with. That's often equally key, if not more. So those are the ones that sort of look to the past in terms of dimension. Now let's look towards the future. Think about your ideal client. Who would you love to do more work with? What kind of company, in what industry, what function, what level in the organization, what type of responsibility, what type of personality would you love to do more work with? Now, my friend Ian Brody, who's also been on here, he talks about 2 things. He talks about the pen picture, where you draw literally a pen picture and you think about, sort of 4 dimensions that person has or experiences. And he talks about the barroom conversation, which is, you're sitting in a bar, it's the end of the day, your ideal client walks in and they'll talk about, a problem they've encountered in their day. What would they say? Think about that. Those are great, great, great processes and techniques to use to understand who your ideal client is and what issues they are likely to be challenging or to be facing. Think issues rather than industries. If you've done a lot of work in one industry, chances are there are other related industries or completely different industries that face the same or similar challenges. And finally, don't overthink it. Just get started. Don't get stuck in analysis paralysis. Yes, you can develop 20 client segments, each with issues and functions and criteria and size of company. But ultimately, what you want to do, what I highly recommend you do, is you take one. You pick one. You don't try to get it perfect. Spend, just a few hours on this. Think about it, and then move on, because there's a whole process to cover after this. All right, so now that you know who to target, the next question is to find out the what. Now, in traditional marketing, the what is really, it often gets boiled down to needs and wants, or as we call it in Ray, we call it afflictions and aspirations. I like to simply call it, what does a person want more of and what does a person want less of, or what do they want to move towards and what do they want to move away from? But you have to go much deeper than that, especially when you're talking to senior executives. They expect you to have a much more holistic understanding of not only their needs and their wants, but their company, their industry, the economy, global trends, politics, the economic environment, and those are all things that together form the what. So let's talk a little bit about the difference between senior executives and mid-level executives. Very, very briefly, this is what we find. Senior executives are setters and drivers of the agenda. This is what they do. That's why they're senior executives by definition. They set the strategy, they set the vision, then they execute. They drive it into the organization. I'm sure you've heard that phrase before. They are the visionaries. They are the ones that are out there evangelizing. They are the ones that are thinking 3 to 5 years out. This is where we want to go. Mid-level executives, they're focused on problem resolution and fulfillment. This is what's holding us back. So, by definition, top executives are possibility-oriented. Oh my God, look at what's possible. Look at where we could be if we only achieved these 3 strategic objectives. Look at what we could accomplish as a company. Mid-level executives, they look at what needs to be resolved in order to be able to function smoothly. My department, my team, my firm. Top executives think in terms of investment. Investment, not just in terms of value for money, but value for time, value for energy, value for organizational resources. They think in terms of trade-offs. They don't think in terms of this is how much money I have and I can spend that X ways. They think about this is the investment that we can make. How can we allocate that optimally in order to fulfill the strategic vision and to execute on it? Mid-level executives think budget. This is the budget that I have now. What can I get for that? Senior executives think in broad enterprise terms, often beyond the enterprise, thinking about the industry, thinking about the economy. Mid-level executives think narrow and specific. And then senior executives have the ability to drive the agenda if there is resistance, either through it or they can overcome resistance and work alongside it or around it, whereas mid-level executives, much like most of us, need to influence without authority. So there really are two big, broad buckets of concerns when it comes to senior executives. And the first one is the business concerns. Do I have the right people on my team? Do I know what's going on? Are they working well together? Can we do better? This is where you as executive coaches come in, because a lot of the work that executive coaches do is work with either a top individual, a senior individual, or a senior individual and their team in order to drive change, in order to improve the functioning of the team, in order to improve individual and collective performance. That's one thing that senior executives tremendously value. The second thing they think about is strategy. Where do we want to go 3 to 5 years out? How are we going to achieve this? How can we, at the same time, innovate and invest, but also maintain and increase shareholder value? These are the big themes they think about. They think about risk more and more so. Risk is not just financial. There's reputation risk, there's brand risk, there's personal risk. If I make this choice, how will that reflect on me in the future? We're talking about really senior executives, typically CEOs who are about to take a board position or retire. They'll think about their legacy. What's my legacy going to be like? What am I going to leave behind? How will I be remembered? And then finally, who can I trust? Who's an ally and who's not? Who's friend or foe, if you will? Now, the flip side of that is if there's business concerns, then of course there's also personal concerns. Personal concerns are typically related to 3 things. And the first is their career. Senior executives are highly driven. They are highly successful, but there's a lot of pressure on them. Unlike popular belief, and I'm sure, again, as executive coaches, I'm not telling you anything new here, but the days of top-down command and control type leadership are over. Senior executives are always managing the support base. They're always looking back, one eye on the future, one eye on the troops. Are they following? They're always selling the vision. They're always thinking 2, 3, 4, 5 steps ahead in terms of their career process. I do a lot of work with executive search firms, and they say the same thing. When we are talking to an executive about making a potential move, they always ask the question, if I do that, what's next? What's next? And they plan this strategically and meticulously. Financial concerns are often on their minds, so they're often tied to the business. The share price impacts the bonus pool or the bonus of the individual executive. Those are things that they care about. What's key to understand is that that's not just about money. Behind the money is emotional impact. My family, my kids, my wife, my extended group, my inner circle. How will this impact them? If I make this move or not make this move, how will that impact my inner circle? And then finally, relationships. Couple of interesting points. I mean, senior executives are busy. We all know this. They're time poor. They're guarded by their inner circle, which not only includes their personal assistant, but there are several other people typically. Here's what's interesting. And tell me you've never been there. I would ask you if we were in a room together, I would say, okay, here's the situation. You're called in for a meeting, you're part of a meeting, and it's supposed to be half an hour. And 2 hours later, you're still going. You know the person in front of you as the CEO is very busy, but he took out 2 hours of his day. Now, why did he do that? He did that because you or the person in the room provided value. People, senior executives often spend time extensively, but selectively. That goes both ways. So Couple of tools, and I promised you I wouldn't just talk strategy and high-level concept. I would also talk about tools. How do you develop a deep understanding of what your clients, your prospects, your I wouldn't call them targets, but your prospects, the people that you want to approach, how do you develop a deep understanding of what they want? And there's really two ways to do it. And I look at this almost like a funnel. On the top end of the funnel, there's things like LinkedIn and Quora, and you can go on groups and you can ask questions and you can read the questions that they ask. And that's a great place to start. Great place to start also is doing research. Great place to start if you already have a network is to do surveys. We do surveys all the time. We do research all the time because it's part and parcel of who we are as a firm, and because we believe that by developing a deeper understanding of the issues, we can help our clients better. Now, interestingly, we also develop a deeper understanding of their needs and how we can help them, of course. Things like Q&A, things like interviews. Interviews are great for this. I'm working on a book, and as part of that, I'm doing interviews with, on the one hand, senior executives and clients, on the other hand, also leading experts in the sales space. Some of these are, most of these are videos, and they're available online. Just Google my name if you're interested in seeing some of those. But that's a great way for understanding the issue as well. And then obviously there's the meeting. So together what you'll find is if you use these tools, some of which are high level and mass, and some of which are very intimate and one-on-one, you'll start getting a pretty deep understanding of the issues at hand. So here's where it all comes together. And after this slide, I think we'll take some questions. So I'd encourage you to start thinking about some questions that you have at this point. First, you want to start big picture. What are the big industry trends? What are the global trends? What's happening in the overall economy? What's the role of government? What's happening inside an industry? Then you want to narrow it down. You really want to think about the company and their challenges, their strategy, their competitors, their brand, how they're perceived in the marketplace. Is their stock, and I don't mean just their financial stock, but their brand, their reputation, is that going up or down? Are they an incumbent or are they a new up-and-coming player? Are they a large firm, a small firm? Are they aggressive? Or are they trying to, conserve the established base that they have? Those are all important things to know before you walk into the room. And then really make it specific. Think about the person. Think about the function. What is a CFO inside a waste management firm in the Midwest and the US care about? What do they care about? But then also think about the person, their personal agenda, their personal agenda. That combination, that's not a typo, that combination of professional and personal. I realize it's not the best kind of words joined together, but it conveys the idea. The two are never separate when you talk to a senior executive. These are not people that think about things in terms of work and life. They just think about things in terms of passion. They're passionate about what they do. How could they work 60, 70, 80 hours for decades and not be passionate about what they do? There is no line. And that's key to understanding when you work with senior executives. And then think about their fears, their desires, their hopes and their dreams, the things that they genuinely, truly care about. A couple of lessons from the field, just very, very quickly and very practical things. First off, never, ever, ever discard the power of the personal agenda. This is huge. The personal and emotional always influences the rational, and most of the time I would say is more powerful than the rational when it comes to making decisions. Never ever think the big picture does not matter. A lot of my friends who are executives say the first thing I'll talk about is big issues, big industry issues. I want to know what that person has to say about those. I want to hear an opinion. True insights often come from linking things together that don't seem to belong. So if you have expertise and experience in one industry, you can apply that to another industry. That's an asset. People want those insights. A great way to have meaningful conversations is to develop a contrarian view. It's not saying to be contrary, but it's saying if established wisdom goes one way and you think something else, don't be afraid to bring that up on the table. Don't be afraid to develop a point of view around that and to put that out into the marketplace. Think new ideas and perspectives. We're going to go into some research that we just completed at Ring Group. Educated me with new ideas and perspectives was the #1 reason why senior B2B buyers picked one firm, one provider versus another. The #1 reason. They told me something I did not already know. And then finally, become a person of interest. Don't just echo everything you hear. Have a point of view, have an opinion. Talk about the broader issue. Talk about the broader impact. So with that, Ben, let me pass it over to you. And shall we take a couple of questions?
Fantastic. There you go. Let me go. We've got a bunch of questions. Okay, let's start here. How do you establish credibility and trust if you're a new coach breaking into the C-suite?
Well, I think I may have had the same question on another webinar. It's a great question. And here's my answer. It's not because you're a new coach that you're new to business. You have previous experience. You have previous insights. You have previous, a background and knowledge. And if you can bring that up, then that's a great way of starting the relationship. Another thing is, new ideas and perspectives don't always or only come from experience. It's not, you don't have to have gray hair like the guy in the picture, or me for that matter, in order to walk in. I mean, I remember when I was a 26-year-old and I walked into meeting rooms and I had an opinion which was obviously not based in experience, but it was based in research. And people found that interesting. So that's a point where you can deliver value. And then thirdly, a lot of the time, what senior executives really want from us and what helps establish that trust and that credibility is not only the fact that we can bring new perspectives, but we can help them clarify and hone and fine-tune their thinking and their perspectives. A lot of the senior people that I talk to, they say, you know what delivers real value? Sometimes I just want someone to listen and to help me get through the mess in my own brain and really help see things more clearly. So I hope that helps. Ben, another question?
Okay. Quite a few of the same questions. How exactly do you buy time from a person?
How exactly do you buy time from a person? I'm not sure if I understand the question.
Okay, I think it might be relating to.
Let me try and interpret.
Getting a virtual assistant, maybe. Because there was a question.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, right. Okay. So what I meant by buying time was buying. I mean, there's two commodities, if you will, that we have, and I'll talk a little bit about the startup or the entrepreneurial perspective. In the beginning, you're time rich and cash poor. So you have a lot of time, you do a lot of stuff, but you don't have the cash to pay for outside services. You'll find that as your business starts growing and as you start doing more work, and especially with high-end and valued clients, the opposite will start happening. You'll start becoming very time poor and cash rich. And that's how you buy time. I mean, very simply, and I can't go into a lot of detail, but there's an entire wealth of information about this on the internet. But a couple of ground rules when it comes to finding people to work with you, and especially VAs, is one, you need to clearly define what you want. What is it you want them to do? You want to break it up into small steps and really give them a process to work against. Two is you want to give out small pilots and see who works out. And then those people that work out, you give them bigger deals. And as time evolves, you evolve into a working relationship. And then, you can almost do it blindfolded. And you can trust them, and you can. And then three is measure, measure, measure. Try and establish some KPIs which you share with them, where you'll say, okay, I'm hoping this will achieve this target. Or this goal or this kind of number, and you see what happens. And if you do those three things, I think you're well underway to having a good relationship. And it is so, so crucial to do this, right? It's so crucial to be able to, for us to reflect, to think strategically, and to invest our time where it is most needed, where it is most crucial.
Okay.
All right, so
Maybe one
with that, I'm just conscious of, yeah, sure, go ahead, Ben.
Okay, just there's a couple of people asked a similar question. Okay, you talked about if you have experience in small to medium-sized enterprises. They're saying it's not that easy to go into corporations. What's your thoughts about going the other way? So you have experience on larger organizations, but you want to target SMEs.
Okay, that's a great, great question, and I get that question very often as well. Here's my take on that. Again, think about the issue, not the industry. So think about the issue, not the size of the company. For example, a lot of the work that I do is related to helping small firms sell to big firms, right? Which isn't that easy, but I can do that because I come from that world of big corporations and I understand that world, and I can convey that knowledge and help a smaller business develop an approach and a strategy in order to get into that larger business. So if you can do something similar, that works really well. I would have a hard time, let me give the flip side example. If I were to come into a small business that sells a product, I would have a very hard time advising them because not only do I not know very much about small business outside of running my own, but I don't really know that much about selling products either. I've always sold services and high-end services for that. So think about that. Is there an area of knowledge, of skill that you have that you can bring to a small business? If there is, I bet you will find that they will crave your knowledge. They will crave your attention. There is a ton of small businesses out there that are looking to grow, that are looking to sell to larger businesses. Conversely, there's a ton of large businesses out there that want to become more entrepreneurial, want to encourage their people to take more risk, want to encourage their people to think more short-term and to think results-oriented. So if you can bring those approaches, if you can bring those issues and your knowledge about those issues to the table, and you can bring those to the other side, quote unquote, that's a great place to start, and people really, really value that. All right, there'll be another opportunity to ask some questions further down the road, but I really want to make sure that we get through this model. So let's go to phase 4. So now we're 3. I'm sorry. So now we understand who we're trying to target, who we're trying to get in touch with, who our segment, if you will, is, our target market, and we have a deep understanding of what they're looking for, their needs, their desires, their hopes, their dreams, but also the bigger picture, the industry, the firm, the bigger trends, the economy. So now it's time to start building, start seeding the relationship. And so I'm glad to say that, and I get this call. I explicitly put this in because someone on the WBEX Facebook page asked this question, and they asked me to talk about cold calling and my thoughts on cold calling. I grew up in an age where we still did cold calling. I'm not, unfortunately, I'm not that young anymore. I'm not that old either. But I sort of, when I was out there selling, I still did cold calls, 50 a day to be exact, for many, many weeks and many, many months, and not many, many years. And there was a reason for that. And the reason was that it didn't work. It did not work. In the beginning, it worked a little bit. And by a little bit, I meant, let me share you a figure. If I made 100 calls, in 20 of the 100, I would end up talking to the person that I had in mind. And in 20% out of those 20%, if you will, so 1 in sort of 5 out of 100, I would end up in a meeting. That's not great. That's not great at all, especially because it takes a lot of effort and a lot of emotional energy, and a lot of people just really hate doing it, including myself. Now, hate doing it or not, sometimes we need to, it's like dieting. If you want to be slim, you need to eat healthy, and you need to take exercise. That's just the way it is. And a lot of people, still think about cold calls that way. Maybe it's something I need to do. Well, no, it's not. Cold calls don't work anymore. Voicemail, email, caller ID, virtual assistants. In fact, more and more people are in more and more meetings. They're traveling. They're working remotely. They're working from home. I mean, I just stopped doing cold calls altogether. Now, when I say cold calls, let me be very, very clear. What I mean is an unsolicited call to someone you've never spoken to before, who doesn't know your name. So that's what I mean by the cold call. So finally, this whole cold calling thing is over. Now, don't just take my word for it. There's a great book called Selling to the C-Suite. And predictably, it's about selling to the C-Suite. And they've done some interesting research. It turns out that about 20% of senior executives will meet after a cold call or a cold email. So that's kind of what I got too. 44% will meet after someone external to the firm recommends them. It could be another consultant, it could be a colleague, a peer of theirs. About the same number will meet after an offsite event. Maybe you did a presentation, maybe you did a talk, so about, sort of 1 and 2 would meet if there was a contact there. 84%, almost 9 out of 10 will meet if you're recommended internally. That's huge. I mean, just think of that different. 4 times more people will meet with you, 4 times more senior executives will meet with you if you are recommended internally than if you just made a cold call, or even a cold call and a cold email for that matter. The numbers are roughly the same. I think if you do both together, you get to 24% rather than 20. So the obvious conclusion here is internal introductions matter. Now, when I say that, most people, they think, okay, so what I need to do is I need to identify the decision maker, then I need to find someone that knows them, and then I need to, sort of ask them for an introduction. And the problem with that is that works sometimes, but it doesn't work very well, and it doesn't work a lot of the time. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Maybe their relationship with that senior decision maker isn't that close. Maybe they themselves are reluctant to introduce you because they don't know you or trust you. Maybe your relationship isn't that close. Maybe there's something else going on. Maybe even if they introduce you, the person doesn't want to see you. Now, the only way that I found successfully to get through that is because you want to be seen in many places. And the way I help my clients think about it is there really are 6 categories of people that are together form the inner circle of trust of an executive. And you want to be connecting with as many of those 6 as possible. And the first one is, and let's start sort of quote unquote top down, the first one is the power behind the throne. Every CEO has a board member they trust and connect with. Every person on a management team has one other person there. It's almost scientific. Every single senior executive that I know has someone that has a massive impact on how they think and how they behave. You connect with that person, that's a great way to be introduced. The other one is formal superiors, their boss, their manager, whatever. They're, again, could be a board member. Their peers, the other guys or the other girls on the management team. They're trusted advisors. One of my best strategies for connecting with new prospects is to establish alliances with people who sell different services, but to the same people, and be introduced by them. And vice versa, of course. It works both ways. It's a great way to get in the door. It's not as good as an internal introduction, but it still works really well. And then there's 2, which in my experience, 80% of people just overlook. The first one is rookies. When I was 28 years old, I was given the responsibility, could be 29, I was given the responsibility to pull together a short list for a project worth over $2 million. And my responsibility was to survey the market and get to a first list of 5. I was 29, and I was not a decision maker in the traditional sense of the word. But for about 2 or 3 months, I was the most important person to talk to about that project and about that, that project worth, again, over $2 million. So try to find those people, the young up-and-comers, the high potentials, the global talents, whatever they're called internally. Try to find those people, try to connect with them. And then there's the old hands. The old hands are people that have no formal responsibility, but they know every nook and cranny of the organization. They know exactly who's who. And not only do they know and tap into the grapevine, they often are the grapevine. You can connect with those people. Those are great ways to get in the door. And literally, to use a metaphor, you get in on the ground floor and the elevator takes you literally straight up to the C-suite. So there's 3 simple steps. First, you want to become a part of the community. And again, reaching out to a single person is not enough. Become part of the inner circle. Most, if not all, executives that I talk to tell me that they'll meet with someone after they heard their name drop from a few different people a few different times. That's a great way to be introduced. That's when you get on the radar, quote unquote. Now, don't just make yourself seen, make yourself heard as well. Share opinions, share facts, share helpful advice, share research. The point is to give value at every single step of your interaction. Don't just, I never call people, prospects or partners or whatever, and I never call them just to say what's up or what's going on. I will never, ever do that. Every single time I think about, even if it's one small thing like a blog post or a research paper or an article that I saw, what value can I deliver? And then ultimately you'll find that there are 2 to 3 people in that whole network, which may be 5, 10, 15, sometimes in extreme cases 20 people that you're talking to and you're building and maintaining relationships with. There are 2 to 3 allies who can really help you. And then connect with them, and that's a great way to get to the executive that you're targeting. Now, a lot of times people ask me, okay, but what if I don't know anyone? Or how do I make that first step? I don't know anybody within that firm. I'd love to do some work with them. And I don't even know necessarily who's going to be the ultimate decision maker or who's going to hire me. So what do I do? What I want to do is very quickly, I want to share 6 outreach strategies that have really, really paid off very well for myself and for my clients. And so the 6 are, again, this is irrelevant or irrespective of the channel that you use or the method or the vehicle, or it's going to be in white papers and videos and blog posts and presentations and breakfast meetings and conferences. The first one is new ideas. That really answers the question, what's new out there? If you have a new breakthrough idea that you've gathered from research that you've done, or perhaps that someone else has done, it's a great way to get in the door, to just start the conversation. The second one is best practice. What works? What works elsewhere? A lot of the people that I talk to, a lot of the people, my clients, for example, they'll always ask me and they'll say, we got this problem. Have you come across that before? And how did you solve it? And oftentimes I did. Because that's the advantage that we have as external service providers. We see a lot of things and we see a lot of industries. That's a great way to start the conversation. New and different. What else? We're already doing this. We've already implemented Six Sigma, or we've already ran our entire management team through a 2-day facilitated session, and every one of them has gotten 3 months of coaching on the back end. We're not getting the results that we're seeing or that we wanted to see. What else can we do? What else is out there? Not reactively answering the question, but proactively. Straight results. Now, when you're talking about coaching, maybe that's a little harder to prove, even though it's not. It certainly isn't impossible. It can be done. But straight results is really about, okay, these are the results that we've achieved in the past for a client that looks a little bit like you. Would you like me to walk you through that? First step. This, by the way, is not only great for connecting and starting relationships, but it's also very good for advancing a sale. If you can do a first project, a small first project, and do something relatively minor, which is within their budget, within their sphere of influence and expertise, it's a great way to get started. And then finally, can you help me? I'm constantly surprised by how willing people are to help, how willing people are to open doors, make introductions, if you just ask them. I personally don't understand the reluctance that people have to ask for referrals, because consistently when I do, and if you do it in the right way, it is by far the best way to establish new relationships with people that are sometimes very hard to establish relationships with. So a couple of lessons learned. It's never about just doing one thing. It's about designing a sequence where you stack one on top of the other, and that's how you get maximum impact. Deliver value at every step is what I said. CEOs don't really have time for updates. Neither does anybody else that I know of. Mix it up. Start with doing something online, a small step, and send them an email, then maybe follow up with a phone call, send them a report, invite them for a breakfast meeting, turn it into a sequence. Start small, take baby steps, and then you go for the grand finale. You don't invite someone to a complimentary 2-day retreat in the Swiss Alps. That's too much. They don't know you, even though it's an attractive idea. But you start small, and by the time you get there, you already have some of a relationship. Measure everything. Do more of what works and stop doing what doesn't work. And then look at what everybody else is doing and try to do the exact opposite. We live in an age where people are bombarded with information. People are bombarded with webinars and research papers. Does that work? Yes. Otherwise, people wouldn't be doing it. Is there perhaps a better way? Maybe it's about doing something small scale. Maybe it's about doing both. Organize a webinar series, and the people that come out on the other end as most interested, invite them to a small scale strategy retreat where you invite 6 CMOs from different non-competing firms, and you think about the larger issues related to brand and brand strategy. Works really, really well. So try to do something that goes against the grain, is outside the norm, if you will. All right. So after you've identified them, after you've done the research, and after you've established the initial contact, now it's time to get through to your MVPs, your most valuable prospects. And so one of the points that I want to make here is that making a sale is a process, it's not an event. The sale is not made when you sign the paper on the dotted line. The sale is not made when the money is transferred in your account. The sale is made at every single step that leads up to that. So this is a basic sales process. You start with a bunch of leads and then you nurture them. And over time, some will raise their hand and they'll become suspects, as in they have a suspected need that you think you may be able to solve. Then from there, you go to prospects. Prospects are when you know that there is that need, it's been confirmed, and you know something along, you suspect, you think, you know, you believe they have a budget, they have the authority to sign off, they're willing to move forward. Then you qualify. That's where Fein comes in. Do they have the financial authority? Do they have the interest? Do they have the need? And are they looking to move in the short term? If those are met, it becomes an opportunity. And then finally, you go into a proposal, which technically goes into won or lost, but I usually put mine in 3 buckets, which is won, lost, and then canceled or postponed, because that more and more, for a variety of reasons, which I can't go into, happens a lot. So from a numbers perspective, here's what that looks like. You may start with 1,000 leads, and out of those 200, at some point throughout, let's say 12 months, we'll have a need that you think you can solve. 50 will turn into prospects. 20 will turn into an opportunity that's confirmed. 10 of those may turn into a proposal, and then you may win 6 if you're reasonably good at what you do, and you may lose 4. Now, if you look at that, that's a pretty scary picture. When I look at, when I show this to some of my clients and prospects, they'll say, wow, I have to get 1,000 leads in to get to 6 deals. And the short answer is no, because you need to factor in the factor of time. With the impact of time, and this is key when you're selling to senior decision makers and large corporations, this is why selling to large corporations is very, very different from selling to small or medium-sized business. Because there's that factor of time. Things take longer, but also when they happen, they're more likely to happen, and they're likely to be bigger. And so if you start with 1,000 leads, instead of 200 suspects, let's say over 36 months, you may end up with 500 and so on and so forth, and the numbers really change. You'll see that at the end of the funnel, you now, where you had 6 opportunities, you now have, I don't know, let's say it's 60, but maybe it's 40, maybe it's 30. The point is that it's not linear. You need to take into account the impact of time. But there's one problem. And the problem is that you often hear no. And a lot of people, when they hear no, they say, well, okay, so there's no deal, there's no opportunity. This is how most opportunities are lost, because people hear no, or they hear not now, and they leave. They go away. And my old sales coach used to say this. He said, you know, a no lasts 90 days. It's kind of his wisdom that he imparted on me. Very old sales, not very old, but a sales veteran. And I always kind of remember that. And so what that means to me is that your job is to nurture until such time when people are ready. And so nurturing is a key part of continuing to build relationships with senior executives and to make more sales and to generate more business. But there's a problem. Not all prospects are created equal. Far from it. In fact, the vast majority of my clients, I believe, when we first meet, spend an inordinate amount of time talking to people they shouldn't be talking to in the first place. So I'm a former management consultant, and so I like to think in 4-box models. And there really are 2 dimensions. The first dimension is, will this person buy from you? And will they buy from you in the next, let's say, 3 to 6 months? The second dimension is, will they talk to you? You really get 4 categories. The first one is the ones that I call the stars. You have access to them, you enjoy access to them, you have a continued relationship, they talk to you, and they're willing and able to buy from you. Those are your top priority, top drawer prospects. Now, the second category are your futures. They're the ones that will buy from you eventually, but it's, for whatever reason, you don't enjoy the access that you would like right now. And so those are the ones that we'll talk about strategies to connect with them and to keep them warm, if you will, because that's what you really want to do. You want to get that access. Then there's the hobbyists. And I use that term very deliberately. They'll love talking. They love talking to you. They'll have meeting after meeting after meeting, but they have no intent to buy from you, and they can't if they wanted to. This is typically what happens when you slip down into middle management, when you talk to specialists in the organization, because they love it. They love talking to outside experts, and they love picking your brain, and they love asking you in for meetings, and would you like to come in to do a lunch and learn session for us? Yes, I would. But they're hobbyists. They can't buy from you even if they wanted to. And then there's what I call the black holes. They don't want to talk to you. They're not really interested in buying from you. And so the 4 strategies to deal with them are simply, the stars are the ones you want to take to the next level. They are the ones you want to seduce. The futures are the ones you want to convert. Those are the ones where you want to get them sort of to the upper right box. The biggest or the best way to do that is to facilitate access. The hobbyists you want to nurture, and then the black holes you want to shift or sift. Shift, they either move up or they move right, and then hopefully at some point they'll end up as stars. And if that's not possible, you want to sift. So you want to, in other words, you want to cull, you want to get them out of your funnel. And this is again about where tactics meet strategy. Tactics, we're talking about autoresponders, using a CRM system, templated emails. I mean, those are all things that other people on WBEX have talked about. I know a lot of you are already doing this. You want to keep track of your opportunities. You want to score them in some way. You want to have an autoresponder so you continue to reach out. You also want to nurture them, and you want to make sure that you're there, and that's the point when there's a trigger event that occurs. Now, what I wanted to do is give you one tool which I use extensively and almost religiously. It's called ToutApp. It's a plugin for Gmail and I believe Outlook. And what it does is simply it allows you to do 3 great things. Number 1 is track email opens and responses. You will never ever have to wonder again whether or not a person opened your email, yes or no, which is great. Number 2 is a templated email. You'll find that in your business, as in mine, there are a lot of repetitive emails that go out with the same content, the same text, more or less. You want to template those, and you want to make sure that you can get those out very quickly. And the third thing is TownApp allows you to build little sequences, which are tremendously useful when it comes to continuing to nurture your, the people that are not quite ready to buy, and then get them to the point where they are. So, in the interest of time, I suggest we skip this questions. I just have a couple more slides, and then we'll take questions on the back. So, the fifth and final step is really how to woo your clients. And I'm going to give you a couple of easy steps. I love the way that marketers always talk about the 5 easy steps to accomplish a goal. But all kidding aside, before you can start wooing your clients, you really need to get in the door first. And there are 6 things that we consistently find that senior executives look for when deciding whether or not to meet with someone. They are, and this is not in order of importance or anything, these are just 6 general things they look for. A personal brand that positions you as a peer. This is huge. You need to be seen, and that relates to point 2, traveling in the same circles, having access to the same relationship, being part of that network of trusted allies, being seen maybe not in the same places, but at least in the same spaces, right? A reputation as a thought leader and a prominent expert. Again, the #1 reason why senior B2B executives and buyers choose to pick one vendor over another is because they're educated with new ideas and perspective. Education is huge. The ability to link what you do to the strategy and objectives. When I ask my clients, what do you do? They invariably answer with a variation on something like, well, I am a and I do X. And then we work with them on rephrasing that answer to something where they'll talk about the objectives their clients are trying to achieve, and then they link what they do in terms of those objectives. There's a connection that transcends business. Senior folks really want to talk to broadly interesting people. You don't have to be an art connoisseur and a golf expert, but it really helps if you have a mindset that goes beyond merely business. And then finally, and this is huge, the belief and the confidence that you truly belong in the room, in the boardroom, in the executive suite, whatever you want to call it. And that is, in my experience, where most people trip up. The biggest problem with having successful meetings and seducing those stars is very often, and I hear this from very senior, experienced, bright, intelligent, highly educated people that are my clients. And they'll say, when I'm in the room with a senior executive, I really don't feel like I have anything to say to them. They won't be interested. They won't like me. I don't really belong there. I don't have anything to contribute. That's one I hear a lot. And the fact of the matter is they're all limiting beliefs. Because in a sense, here's what's happening. When the need for approval is larger than the need to add value, to make your point, to contribute, we find that in terms of business development and in terms of closing new business and generating new business, performance is impacted 35% negative, 35% less. This is based, by the way, on an assessment that we do, which has been taken by 600,000 people across something like 120 or 180 organizations. So it's very statistically valid. And the next question is, okay, so if my limiting beliefs are impacting my performance, what do I do about it? And the answer is to prepare. You never practice at the game, you practice before the game. Now, the next question then obviously is, well, that's nice, but how do I prepare? And I've developed a very simple framework, which I also shared in the pre-session, which consists of 5 key questions to really ask before the meeting. Now, when I say before the meeting, I literally mean, I don't mean 10 minutes before. I mean, when you're preparing for a meeting. And I ask a lot of my clients this. I say, what do you do in terms of preparation? And they'll say, I'll look at the website, I'll check out their CV, I'll go on LinkedIn and I'll Google the person, I'll think about the few questions that I want to ask to get started, and that's great, but that's not enough. There are 5 core questions you want to ask before the meeting. And the first question is, What does this person care about? What are their concerns? Now, when it comes to cares, and I hinted at it before, there really are two types. People, senior executives, care about the rational benefits of how you can help them, the financial impact, the cost savings, the bottom line performance impact, how much better their team is going to gel and be cohesive, how much more aligned everybody's going to be with the strategy, how much more you're going to retain key individuals, or how much by what percentage you have retained, or you have increased retention for key individuals for your clients before. But people care much deeper about the emotional impact of how you can help them. What does this mean for me? What does this mean for my family? What does this mean for my future as an executive? If you as an executive coach work with me and we work around my own individual performance, how is that going to position me for that role that I have in mind for myself 2-3 years down the road? The second question is, how will I start the conversation? And I literally mean that. What interesting educational new ideas and perspectives will I bring up? The third question is, what value will I deliver? So how will I start the meeting? And then what value will I deliver? Now, value comes in many forms. When I say value, typically people think about financial value, right? There's value in performance, improvement, cost reduction, cycle times. There's financial value. There's also relationship value. What kind of network do you have that they could be interested in? Who could you introduce them to? And then there's personal value. What personal value do they derive from sitting down with you, having a meeting with you? And so I love this quote by Warren Buffett: price is what you pay and value is what you get. Price, like value, is not just about financial elements. Price is about the time that you invest, the resources that you invest, the energy that you invest. And so that's something that you definitely want to think about. When we look at organizations, and this is from our report on high performance and strategic account management, when we look at organizations that are tremendously good at selling bigger and bigger and bigger deals to their biggest, most profitable, most promising, best clients, they consistently do two things really, really well. They have an internal process that runs continuously for assessing how they can add more value, in whatever form or shape it takes, during the buying process, during the sales process. Not when they're working with them, during the sales process. 2.5 times more likely to have that. And then they're almost 3 times more likely to have a process to work collaboratively with their accounts to co-create value. There's this myth that value is found, value is created, and it is not created individually, it is created collectively. Value is what you deliver when you're in the room with a prospect, with a senior executive, and you help them see new, innovative ways of achieving their goal, of achieving their objective. High performers were between 2.5 to 3 times more likely to have processes in place and continually think about how to add and co-create value during the buying cycle, during the sales process, not just afterwards. The fourth question is, what new ideas will I introduce? And I really want you to think about this as almost like a little checklist before you walk into the meeting. Now, in the research that we did, which just came out earlier this year, we talked to 700 senior B2B buyers. Some of you may have read the report. We analyzed a little over 3 billion in transactions, and we were trying to answer 2 simple questions. In the eyes of the buyer, what separates the winners, the one they give the business to, from the numbers 2, 3, and so forth? And what does that mean for the likelihood of buying from them again and again in the future, of getting referrals and getting introductions? The top 2 things buyers say winners do much more often than second place finishers is educated me with new ideas or perspectives and collaborated with me. In fact, winners are up to 3 times more likely to educate buyers with new ideas or perspectives. And I want to make a point here. The key word is not ideas and it's not perspectives. The key word is new. It's about new, groundbreaking ideas that people executives, prospects, partners, whoever you're talking to have not considered before. New ways of seeing things, new approaches to things, new creative ways of solving problems or achieving objectives. And this is absolutely key. This is the biggest reason that buyers, such as the ones that buy executive coaching services, buy from firm A versus firm B. This should be something that's on your mind when you're thinking about, after you spend all that time nurturing and qualifying and prospecting, and now you're finally going into the meeting, going into the room. This is one thing you definitely want to be focusing on. And the final question is, how will I end the conversation? According to CSO Insights, of all the forecasted opportunities, the dreams we have in the beginning of the year of how much we're going to generate in terms of new business, a little over half is lost. And 40%, 4 in 10, are lost to no decision. Your biggest competitor is not your competition. It's not the firm around the block. It's not the other executive coach. It's doing nothing. It is doing nothing. Now, it used to be that your biggest job as a seller was to find a need and then position a way to solve that, and then you would make a sale. Today, your biggest priority is to keep your buyer engaged with the process, to make sure that your buyer moves throughout the process. That is the biggest priority. That is why thinking about how you will end the meeting is as crucial as how you will begin the meeting. Think about what's the next step? What's my ultimate objective? What am I hoping to achieve? What kind of options will I give them at the end of the meeting in terms of moving forward? Senior executives love options. They love to be presented with choices. And often when you present 3 options or 3 scenarios, they'll make up a 4th one, and that's the one you'll go for. But that's great, because now you have their buy-in, you're on the way, first meeting's over, it went well, and now you're on the way to becoming that trusted advisor. So the 5 questions: what does this person care about? How will I start the conversation? What value will I deliver? What new ideas and perspectives will I introduce? Keyword new. And then how will I end the conversation? So what if you could double the size of your average sale? I hope the 5 steps that I walk you through gave you an idea of how you could do that. And in my experience, here is a way that's worked for me, a way that worked for my clients. And the 5 steps of the C-suite are really this. Know your sweet spot. Develop a deep understanding of who your ideal clients are, the ideal industries, your ideal segments that you target, based on your strengths, but also on the kinds of clients you want to work with. Understand the issues, the afflictions, the aspirations, the dreams, the desires, not just for the person, but for the firm, for the industry. Reach out and start a conversation. Connect with your most valuable prospect. See who comes out to play. Think about not just about who comes out to play, but also who stays behind on the bench. And think about whether you want to continue talking to them, continue to try to get them in the game or not. Zoom in on those that matter. Nurture your up-and-coming stars and the ones you're having difficulty accessing, and try to bring more of those into that upper right corner. Remember, and then beware of the black holes. They will suck up your time. They will reach out. They will be happy to have meetings, but you're not going to make sales. And then finally, seduce your clients. Think like a trusted advisor. Act like one. Be brave. One of the biggest things that senior executives tell me behind closed doors, and back when I was still an executive myself, was, I really appreciated how they stood up for their point of view. I really appreciated how they helped us see that what we were initially thinking about doing did not work. Deliver value, deliver new ideas and perspectives. I love this quote, and that's what I'm going to end this talk with. Lao Tzu: do the difficult things why they are easy. A journey of 1,000 miles must begin with a single step. I encourage you to take that single step today. I hope you found this valuable. I see a ton of people, in spite of the fact that I was slightly long on the timing, a ton of people stuck around for questions. I love that. I will stick around for as long as you want me to. I will continue to ask or to answer questions and to engage in the conversation. One final thing before we open up the floor for Q&A. The report that I mentioned, What Sales Winners Do Differently, Ben and I are going to find a way of making that accessible on the WBEX member portal, so you'll get that. You can find that there. With that, Ben, let me open up the floor for questions.
Awesome. Ego, thank you so much, my friend. Okay, so there's a few questions around coaching and consulting. And what is the difference you make between consulting and coaching in relation to market and business expertise in terms of marketing and selling it?
Oh, that's a great question. I think there's a lot of parallels between consulting and coaching, and I think sometimes the two overlap. And so it's not always clear where one ends and the other one finishes. But I think let's look at a couple of parallels or a couple of commonalities. Both are really intended to drive the clients forward in terms of their performance and in terms of achieving their objectives and their goals. Both require a certain level of expertise and experience, which can come from having done it, but which also can come from having a process in place that you work through. A lot of coaching is about, making sure that you guard the process, that you work within the process. Consulting is the same. And then finally, a lot has to do with, and it's really about the person rather than the firm or the product. What separates a stellar consultant or a stellar coach from a mediocre one? Is it experience? Sometimes, but not always. Is it approach? Perhaps. But what it really is their ability to connect with people and to get people to move and to get people to advance. So in terms of marketing and selling, also the two are similar. We find that even in large deals, there's this myth in corporations, I think, or about corporations, that the decision-making process for large deals must be absolutely a very diligent, very objective, and very process-oriented. And I know it appears that way from the outside, but nothing could be further from the truth. The people that are doing the selling, the people that are doing the generation or the business development, whatever you want to call it, have a disproportionate impact on how decisions are made. Disproportionate. We ended up in the project that I mentioned, the one where I was 29 years old and I was doing the initial screening. We ended up, we had the short list of 5 contained 3 known names in the industry, the behemoths. It contained 1 small local firm and 1 small firm which had never done, I think they'd done 1 project in Europe to that point. I was based in Amsterdam. And we ended up selecting the one that never did any work in Europe and was a small firm, much smaller than what we were used to working with. We had to, get them through procurement to sort of almost handhold them through. And the reason we selected them was because we had a good feeling about the people and because we knew that they would ultimately do what was in our interest as a firm and not in theirs.
Awesome. Thank you. There you go. Okay.
All right, Ben. Another question, perhaps?
Next question is this. How do you get an appointment with a CEO? Often their PAs screen inquiries and they are never available. Do you need persisting until they say yes, or do you have any other special ways of doing this?
I do. Yes, so there's a couple of ways of answering this, and one is to understand that the PA is only one way to get into the C-suite or into that executive's office. And so the other ones are, as I mentioned, the power behind the throne, the rookies, the peers, the other executives, especially also the old hands, so the ones that are, in any one of those can get you directly into an executive's office. The trick is to find, again, 84% of executives say that they will meet with a person who's been recommended internally. They didn't say who's been introduced or recommended or led through by my personal assistant. They said recommended internally. So keep in mind that a PA is only one of the people that you want to be targeting. Now, it's very often an important one and one of the best ways you can invest your time especially in longer sales cycles, such as the one that senior executives tend to be, is to build and cultivate strong relationships with that PA. When I started out as an entrepreneur, I sold 6 figures worth of business within 3 months of starting out. And that was not because I was such a great salesperson. It was because I connected with a personal assistant, not even of an executive, but of a team. And I continued to nurture a relationship with her, even though there was no short-term opportunity, but we continued to talk, and I continued to provide value. And about 2 months or 6 weeks, I think, after we first started talking, she came back to me. She said, next week there's a meeting with the management team. We'd like you to come in because there's a new project and they're going to be briefing a short list of providers. Would you like to come in and be part of that process? And I said, absolutely. So a couple of key lessons is, one, build relationships with multiple people in the firm, not just the PA, not just one person. 2, give it time. It's always going to take time. And the only thing you can do throughout that time is to deliver value, to continue to deliver value in as many ways as you can, and be economical about it. It doesn't mean that you have to call them every week, and it doesn't mean that you have to set on a huge breakfast meeting in a fancy hotel costing tens of millions or tens of thousands of dollars. It means that sometimes it's about different touches. A report here, a LinkedIn connection request there, a helpful introduction there, and then maybe an invitation to a live event. And then finally, I would say, if you deliver value to everybody in that process, you will end up getting that meeting. It is virtually inevitable. All right, next question.
Cool, thank you, Ego. How do we overcome being one person with a wealth of experience and working solo? Do you recommend approaching with associates or as coach teams?
That is a great question. It's a question that I personally face myself. I found that personally I'm better as part of a team. And it can be a loose team, it can be a virtual team. But I do feel that especially, and again, this is the world that I sort of quote unquote grew up in. If I were selling a small and medium-sized business, that wouldn't be so much of an issue. But I find there are 2 things that are or 3 things that are tremendously powerful in overcoming that. And the first one is, even if you're an individual and you're selling to large corporations, if you are a world-recognized expert and you build a brand as an expert, that is tremendously powerful. I get many calls today from people that have found me through my blogging or my website or YouTube from large corporations. And the reason they reach out to me is because they've read some of my thought leadership and they recognize that I have some expertise in this space. So that's one way of getting over it. The second way, which I think was the suggestion by the person that asked the question, was to align yourself with others. Now again, there's varying degrees of involvement there. On the one extreme, you have joining a firm. On the other extreme, you have a loose set of allies and you pursue pitches or opportunities together. Both are equally valid. It really depends on what works for you. But I will say that that creates the level of trust and commitment that sometimes you need when selling to larger corporations. Risk is a major factor. They don't want to be seen as taking a bet on the small guy who ultimately didn't turn out to work out. And so 2 ways of avoiding, the way to think about it is almost like, if things go wrong, how will this executive explain their decision later on? They'll either say, I work with them because they're a huge expert in that space. Okay, we understand that. I work with them because they were a respected firm. That's the number 2. And the third one is thought leadership. Thought leadership, and I do mean leadership, again, new ideas and perspectives, is tremendously powerful when it comes to building your brand. And when it comes to building opportunities and generating opportunities out there. And so those are 3 ways that work well in isolation. Let me give you one final sort of tip, if you will. If you combine 2 or even 3 out of those 3, That's where magic starts to happen. If you get a team together where there's a couple of people with strong brands that are seen as experts in their space, you work together collaboratively, and you produce leading edge thought leadership, that's where you really get amazing opportunities. And generally speaking, people don't ask the question, okay, so why did you pick them, or why are they part of this project or of this pitch? So hopefully that answered the question.
Okay, thank you very much, Fergus. Maybe one or two more questions, final questions, for coming to the top of the hour. Do you find there to be a difference between senior men and senior women?
I would almost have to ask another question, which is a difference in terms of what? I think generally speaking,
I think it's probably in terms of, in terms of
I'd say it really depends.
in terms of actually selling to the C-suite. So if they are in
Yeah.
fact a man or a woman.
Yeah, a couple of observations or thoughts on that. One, I think generally speaking, yes, there are differences. There are differences in the way they operate, the way they make decisions, the way that they. And I don't want to generalize here, so I'm hesitant to blurt out some kind of statement, blanket statement about men versus women or something different. But I think we all recognize that fundamentally people are geared in different ways, and men and women to some extent are. There's I don't know. My own experience suggests that perhaps women are more collaborative in their decision making, but again, I can think of off the top of my head 3 or 4 examples where that certainly isn't the case. So it really depends on the individual. What I will say is that the higher up you go, especially when it comes to giving that sort of that what's the word I'm looking for? Not the image, but the impression of objectivity in the decision-making process, which is crucial even for senior executives, you will find that they start behaving in similar ways and similar patterns. And it's really about almost connecting on an individual level and understanding what drives that individual, rather than it is to think in broad terms of men versus women. I think there are, in both categories, in both genders, there are people that are driven primarily by some motivators rather than others. Financial gain, prestige, contributing to the greater good, the importance of their, the input of their, and the happiness and the support of their inner circle. What we at Rain Group do, and I'd encourage everybody here to check it out, just Google the 8 buyer personas, or Rain buyer persona, something like that. We've done some research and we classify buyers into 8 personas. Things like Collaborative Claire, Skeptical Steve. We gave them sort of recognizable names so people could see how that would work. And those tend to work really well. You have people that are very concerned about, when they make a decision, what is going to be the impact on my larger team and my organization? How will they feel about this? How will they accept this decision or not? Then you have people that they need to think things through, and they will play devil's advocate, and they will ask questions. An analytical Al, for example, they want to get to the nitty-gritty of it. Whereas a collaborative Claire, she'll want to know that her team feels good about the decision. And so those are, I think, very helpful ways of understanding the large groups of buyers or buyer personas that are out there. Ben, do we have time for one more question?
I think we've pretty much run out of time, but maybe a quick answer to this one. Okay, I just had a question. What questions, do you have some examples of some questions that will keep buyers engaged?
Oh, absolutely. All right, very, very quick answer. Questions that will keep buyers engaged, and by engaged I mean really feel like they're having a great conversation and you're helping them get to the issue. Let me think off the top of my head. One is, okay, imagine this happens, where you want to be 12 months from now. What will be different? What will have changed? It's a great question to ask. Another great question to ask, and that takes a bit of bravery and a bit of courage to throw it up, but another great question to ask is, so what kind of bad things are really going to happen if you don't do this? If you don't do this? you'll start seeing people literally from leaning back, sort of, lean forward and think of, so that's a great question to keep buyers engaged as well. Another great question is, imagine this all goes horribly wrong and you don't get any of the results. What's the consequence of that? Another great question is, why are you moving and why now? Why is this the time when we're talking? And one of my favorite questions to start with is, obviously, I mean, you're very busy, I'm very busy. What was it about us that made you want to have this meeting? It's a great way to get, the conversation going. Generally speaking, what I try to do is I try to have a mix of, sort of fairly open questions and then questions that really get people to think and reflect and hone their own and sharpen their own saw, if you will, in their own thinking. And then some questions they didn't expect, some complete left fielders, like the one that I said about, what happens if you don't do this? Or, why would you pick us and not one of our competitors? People are often surprised when I do, but it builds engagement and it builds trust and credibility. All right, Ben. I think that's a wrap here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Hey, so please, those of you that are still with us, if you can jump onto the Facebook wall, facebook.com/WBECS, and share your love. There's lots of fantastic feedback been coming in through. Lots of people saying the most educative talk yet for me. Thank you ever so much. Really enjoyed this. Congratulations. What a great session. Thank you so much. Fantastic insights from start to finish. Excellent session. Blah, blah. Okay, so put that on the Facebook wall, facebook.com/WBECS. Now, we only have 2 more sessions left. The next session is in about 2 hours' time. We have Frances Hasselbein. She was the founder of the Peter Drucker Foundation, and who Peter Drucker said is, who Marshall Goldsmith in fact told us that Peter Drucker described Frances as one of the leading, I forget what he said, but the world's #1 leadership icon or guru, or the world's leading coach or trainer on leadership, something like that. But so someone you really want to learn from. She was the CEO of the Girl Scouts of America. She won the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which is only one of 2 ever handed out. She is amazing, and the way that she thinks is just incredible. So check out Frances in about 2 hours' time. Also, we have Howard Morgan, who is again an absolute rock star, closing us off, and he has a huge experience working with some of the CEOs from the top Fortune 50 companies. Personally, he's wrote a few books with Marshall Goldsmith, and he's a super smart gentleman to close it off. Anyway, big thank you to Ego for today's session. It was super fantastic, and I am looking forward to the final 2. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us, and I will see you in about 2 hours' time. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.